Evening and welcome once again to Gaming Under the Influence. I'm Mike here with Alex, coming to you guys from Woodbridge, Ontario at Green Dragon CVR to talk to you again about video games.
Yes!
How are you, man?
I'm doing good, man. Very good. How are you?
Good. Happy to be back here. Got a little buzz going.
Yes.
Third beer, that's the one, doesn't it? It's like a charm.
I think I'm on my second, but
Cheers.
if you are on your third, then yeah, good job. Definitely feeling sufficiently influenced for this episode.
I noticed in the past couple of weeks, people were talking again in the news about if video games are art. And to anybody who's listened to this show before, I'm sure you understand what our view on this is, but I think it might be time to address the question again, because not only are people talking about it with different perspectives involved, but I think my own views have changed or grown perhaps and become more explicit, and I'm sure that's true for you or everybody else too who has a consistent occupation with a subject over time, right? Mm-hmm. It's worth restating, and we'd like to talk about this question again. Are video games art, And before we get into what we think, I think it's worth mentioning what the two articles that prompted this conversation in the first place said on the subject. And the first one was a recapitulation of Roger Ebert's view. He was that famous film critic.
Yep.
Probably died in 2015. I'm not exactly sure.
Something like that.
Famous for the view that video games, I think he said this in 2005, we were just reading, are not art,
Yes,
and
he did.
He expressed this in a kind of a pompous manner that irritated some people, and I'm sure if we were to read it, it would equally have that effect on us or anybody who's familiar with the medium. And he admitted that he was writing from a position of ignorance. He didn't play games.
Right.
But all this aside, even according to like my own criteria for what makes art and what makes video games art, I think he had some good points, And I think we can boil those down to, you can find the citation to the article I'm referring to, by the way, in the website corresponding to this podcast episode. And Roger Ebert says, firstly, that games aren't art because art requires a sort of authorial control over the artwork,
Right.
Art is something made by the guy and imposed on the fucking matter, and when you're making choices or, moving around, you have some freedom within that, it violates the artistry of the work, right?
Yeah.
This is a good point we're going to get back to. And secondly, he said that this is a more contingent point. This isn't a principled point about why video games can never be art. It's about why they aren't right now. He says that compared to great works of literature, I think he specifically mentions Cormac McCarthy, like Blood Meridian, and he mentions Shakespeare. Great works of literature, great films like that tell you something about the human experience, something about the universe. They're meaningful. Yep. Once you fucking leave them, you feel like they're more real than the real world, right? Mm-hmm. He said, speaking in 2005, there's no video games that do this. And whilst we can, I think there definitely were at that time. You can't blame the man for not knowing what those were.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not mainstream knowledge. When you think about video games, you think about bullshit,
like we were just saying a couple minutes ago, like even
to this day when you think about video games.
When did Final Fantasy X come out? In 2000?
2001, I think. But I think Final Fantasy IX, there was a bunch of great games.
Oh,
Metal
definitely.
Gear Solid was already out, but again, this is not mainstream knowledge.
Just trying to think of like something you could have fucking
You could have said Metal Gear Solid, you could have said Final Fantasy, all of these things, which definitely, we'll get back to this, but the important thing is, and I think everybody would agree, most people who aren't familiar with the medium looking in from outside will think that it consists of just facile crap,
like
right?
Super Mario Bros. And this and that.
And what's more, like the industry, such as it is, the gaming community doesn't do a good job of making people think otherwise, because the most fucking outward-facing things that we have are just fucking horseshit, like esports, tournaments, streamers, fucking nonsense. It's not about the subject matter being conveyed by the medium. It's instead about this idiotic human experience that we can commoditize for cash, and ad dollars, right? So you can't blame people, either Roger Ebert or people now, looking in from outside,
even more prevalent now than it was when he was around, right?
It's much worse. It's much worse. Yeah,
yeah, right.
Like at least if he lived, he would probably be even more pessimistic.
Oh fuck, for sure.
But the point is, I don't think he's right absolutely, but he does have a point that these things are definitely contrary to art as we're going to define it. Yeah. And the games that do this aren't fucking what we would define as art. This is true, right? And it is an important point that the artist needs control over the fucking work for it to qualify as art. That's what makes it different than science. In science, or in knowledge in the fucking technical sense, abstract knowledge, you know something outside of your head. Your mind conforms to the world. But in art, the world outside conforms to your mind. And if that's not happening, if there's some fucking tension there, art is compromised. This is a good point, right? But
I guess,
we're gonna get back to why this isn't entirely true. The other article that mentioned this in recent weeks was something to the effect, I don't remember who the fuck wrote it. It wasn't an interesting personality. It's not even worth bringing up the author, but it was the effect that video games are a great or a better form of art because they incorporate all other forms of fine art. The guy was saying, well, there's fucking, there's stuff from film, like people build like buildings in it, like architecture. All of the other fine arts are contained in it, therefore it's the best form of art. And this is obviously a more generous assessment than Ebert offers, but I think it's wrong for the... Yeah, I think it's wrong ultimately, though, for the same reason, right? Mm-hmm. And that reason, like before we get into its explanation, would simply be that these guys are both referring to the material component of video games as art, right? It would be like somebody talking about sculpting, but referring only to the properties of clay.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you're talking only about the stuff people make the games out of in terms of, player choice, let's say, in terms of all of these fucking artistic mediums being involved. Yes, this is all true, but that only describes the matter of the thing. And that matter can be shared with stuff that's not art or even with stuff that's not games.
Yeah, right? You're not really looking at the whole thing, the product that's there, right?
In other words, I'd say we're not assigning the formal reason. We're not defining art according to its essence or its formal cause. We're defining it according to extrinsic factors or material things that don't actually touch on what it is in itself, right? And here's where I think fucking maybe we can have, where we have something to offer maybe other people have not thought so much about. I'd wager that 99% of people who write on this subject have no fucking idea, including Ebert, who admitted as much, what art actually is. They have no definition. They have no resources to turn to in contriving one, right? But I think, at least according to the worldview that fucking was popular in the Latin West, I guess, compared to the continental West, like French and Germany, until the 20th century, we have a definite understanding of what art is that results from our ontology, our view of being, right? And without getting too deep into the background stuff, which you can read about in very great detail, hundreds of thousands of words on our website. Art is kind of the opposite. Yeah. Art is kind of the opposite of knowledge, you see. Knowledge is, when the mind knows the outside world, when it knows being according to the rule of the outside world, okay? Mm-hmm. When you know something, in science, properly so called, or in fucking speculative knowledge, there's something outside the mind that your mind shares a form with, but not according to the conditions that thing has outside the mind. When you know something in knowledge, there's something truly in your mind that is shared with the thing, but you leave behind all the material conditions and subjectivity of that thing. To know it at all, it can't be as it is outside your head. There's no fucking, when you know a cow, there's not like a cow appears in your fucking brain. That's stupid as shit, right? No. Look deeply anyways, people have tried, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
What happens instead is that intentionally your mind adopts the form, the essence, whatever phrase you want to use here. Formal causality is the technical word that people would use in philosophy to describe it, of the thing outside. But again, this leaves behind its actual substantial being, its individuality. That's outside. You share only its essential, its formal characteristics, okay? This is knowledge. That's it leaves sort of a divorce between the knower and the thing known, okay? You only know the thing insofar as its subjectivity is left behind and it obtains in the mind in conditions of abstraction, improper to real things, okay? Mm-hmm. There's a divorce between you and the thing known. That's essential to this. When we come to art, the situation is quite the opposite. Art, too, at least we're talking now from the perspective of the person understanding the artistic form, not making it. When you understand a poetic creation, like a novel, a video game, a movie, as surely as when you love somebody, this applies here too. Instead of knowing the thing in abstraction, instead of leaving behind its individuality and only understanding its form in distinction to its matter, etc., instead of that, what happens when you know an artistic form as much as when you love somebody or know something via sensible knowledge, what happens is the thing itself in its individual conditions is acting upon your mind directly. And through its sensory accidents, you know the thing itself, not separate from what it actually is, but as it actually is. We say this is connatural knowledge. It means that instead of there being abstract knowledge, where you only know something of the thing apart from itself, you know the thing as it is in itself, acting directly upon the mind.
Right.
Through the medium of its sensible characteristics, sounds and playable things and this and that, right?
Yeah.
That's what makes it art. You know the outside thing directly. When you contemplate art, that is, right?
Yeah.
This is the difference here that we're going to latch onto in elaborating why I think video games are the most advanced form of art anyways,
What makes video games different as a medium of art compared to other kinds of art is that when you're looking at a movie, when you're reading a novel, when you're fucking looking at a painting, whatever else, okay? You do know the thing in the concrete, as I just said. It's fucking actual form, which, by the way, there's a distinction here to be made between the art in and of itself, which is entirely in the mind of the artist. It's his concept of the work versus its expression in the world, all its material characteristics, see? These are the instrument whereby you know it, like its limbs, its appendages, but they're merely an instrument or expression of the concept in the guy's head, okay?
Yeah.
That's truly the art. Now, what makes video games, in my opinion, the most advanced form of art is that in all these other kinds, as I was just saying, the difference between you and the thing you're knowing concretely remains, you know? You're watching a movie about you're watching The Matrix, Neo's over there, you're over here. Doesn't matter what the subject matter is. My point is that even though you're knowing it concretely and not abstractly, you are still you and it is still it. The distinction between knower and known remains in other genres, mediums of artistic expression. But video games, like ritual, I would say, you know, like the Catholic Mass or fucking Greek pageants, it requires that for the work to happen, the very matter of the work, kind of the marble upon which it happens, is the exercise and consent of the fucking guy contemplating or viewing it.
Yeah,
see?
yeah.
It requires, instead of you understanding the thing as separate from yourself, that instead the form that your mind takes on in knowledge is the thing as it is in itself. You need not understand the other concretely. You need to become the other concretely to play a game, right? We say intentionally, right? You take on a second nature. I think that the technical way you'd express this in the kind of philosophy we're using here is that the mind adopts a new habit, you know? A habit is a quality of the mind that orients it towards a stable thing. Like when you have understanding or science, we say these are intellectual habits. When you have a moral virtue or a moral vice, like gluttony, this is a habit. A stable disposition of the faculties towards a certain object, you see? And when you play a game, habitually in the same manner, the mind develops a new quality whereby through this quality, the game takes place, right? This is the essential medium of the thing, that the mind is becoming the thing being represented and exercising or performing the game into existence. This is why games are the most advanced form of poetic depiction. Or ritual, I guess you could say. And, you know, we could extend this to fucking other considerations, but let's leave it at games for now and let people's imagination take that the rest of the way, right?
Yeah, it's it makes a lot of sense, though, because really it's like, you know, to the point where you immerse yourself into that, and that's part of the thing, right? Like, how many times are you playing a game and you don't feel into it and immersed?
For sure.
Like, it's just like a fucking bleh, but...
It's important to emphasize the twist of mind that's essential here, though. It's not like VR, like you see or feel yourself in it. It's that, again, what your mind is doing when you play a game is not like what your mind is doing when you watch a movie. When you watch a movie, something's happening outside you. When you play a game, you are the thing it is happening to. Right? The mind has to take on intentionally the form of the other as a subject, right? Like not merely as it is, you know, apart from the subject, right? I think that's what makes games. This sense in which, you know, like art's supposed to bring about a concrete union with the thing known, games do that at a whole other level because they require that in terms of one's own subjectivity, right? Yeah. That's why I think, like, at least this isn't even getting into what formally makes a fine art, but we're saying now why compared to other forms of expression, there's in principle no reason to say video games are not potentially a way to express art. Literally, as we've just explained, they have more capacity to do so.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Mediums, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I think then fucking the last thing to talk about is, you know, having said all this, it's important to recognize that what we're talking about is the matter of video game art. You still haven't made a work of art just because you're using this, right? In the same way I would say, like, you can write a novel. You see, words can be the matter of a work of art. But what's the difference between a novel and a fucking instruction manual for your toaster, you know? What is actually? Like, one's fucking, the form being expressed with the words in each case is different, right? And I'd say what makes the fucking form of the novel a work of fine art and the instruction manual not, is that a work of fine art is a form born in the mind of the artist, like we were just talking about. It's in his concept, but it's not born to satisfy some goal out in the world. It's made only for its own sake, because internally it's self-sufficiently good. Like, it's beautiful in and of itself. You see? Beauty just being, you know, this sounds like a highfalutin word, but when you say something's beautiful, all you're really saying is that it has some intelligibility to it. It has a form. It has something about it to be known. And in that respect, this intelligibility, I don't mean in this facile emotional sense, like, oh, I'm happy. I mean, intelligibility in and of itself delights, like satisfies or completes the intellectual action. That's what beauty is. That immediate impression of the intelligible form, not abstractly, like directly, that in that fucking exact intuition brings about intellectual fullness. That's what we're referring to when we say beauty. Just the thing, insofar as it has some fucking something to be known in it, and that thing to be known is not an instrument like a boat for sailing across the ocean or some shit, or a clock for telling time. It's instead
hotbox warming up your pizza.
Yeah, nothing like that, man. It's a form that's only purpose is to be beautiful, to be intelligible, for you to know and enjoy. Right? That's right. Yeah. And you know, this is why we talk about other times why world building is the highest form of art, because of course everything else fucking is not as self-sufficient, right? Like a world is a unit that fucking has no compare. And you know, that's why something like that doesn't compare to, or that's why like a rug, which can still be a work of art and a work of fine art insofar as it's designed to be beautiful, can't compare to like a world, because the intelligibility, the formality bound up in a world for the mind to fucking delight or be completed in is fucking at a whole other level, right?
Oh, yeah.
So that's what makes it fine art. Not only are video games the best method for expressing an idea, but what makes that idea fine art is that it's created for its own sake and not to satisfy some instrumental purpose, you see? And I think we can tell in all of this why Ebert and this other fucking article are off of the mark, right? You know, so far as Ebert is talking about a lack of authorial control in games, of course, the player fucking doesn't invent the game world. He's literally the clay. Does the clay have control over the fucking statue or the wheel over the car? No, of course not, bro. It's an instrument. It's the matter of the thing. It's literally the bitch of the thing. It's not like it's inventing it. So clearly it's not true that there's no authorial control, right? If anything, the author has more control over you because you are literally entering into the composition to bring the text into existence, right?
True, yeah, that's one way to look at it.
And on the other hand,
doesn't work without your fucking input.
That's right.
You are required to be
exactly
in it.
And on the other hand, whether or not games use all these mediums, fucking, it doesn't make a difference if what they're expressing is the equivalent of a toaster construction manual or something like that, right? If the idea exists for the sake of making money or for competition or for any other end we could think of other than some self-satisfying, like, you know, work of fucking beauty that's its own cause and end. If it's something if it's something other than that, then I think like it doesn't matter that it uses all kinds of artistic mediums. It's still not a work of fine art, right? So we have to be careful not to function purely with material definitions in mind, you know, when approaching these subject matters. It's art because it's created solely for the purpose of being beautiful, the concept in the guy's mind, and video games are the best way to express art because they require an unprecedented union between the guy contemplating the art and the artistic concept.
Yeah, that's a fucking good point to me. I mean,
that would be my fucking last word on that, I think.
Fucking Roger Ebert, the big time movie guy. Of course he's fucking hacking down on video games, but
it's not a very articulate man in any of his writing on the subject, but he does make a couple of good points.
Yeah.
Those are good points that need to be addressed, right?
Yeah, that's just it though. They you know, need to be addressed because it's like you said, you know, has no one shown him a Final Fantasy game? Like, come on. But I guess
that's his other point though. There hasn't been an idea expressed that was but there has, of course.
There has, of course, but maybe even just, you know, maybe his mind can't be changed, and as soon as you hand him a controller, it's just like, nah, I'm locked out of this. Like he's like the earliest form of like easy mode guys. Like he doesn't even want to know about it. Like I don't know.
you could fucking, you know, I'm sure it was true in 2005, but now we know that fucking, you know, now we can easily just bang off like 50 different games that whose concept and world building and the fucking, you know, if you want to get into it, the human themes and all that more shit, like that well exceeds what we find in.
Even if we're restricted to back then, at the time, you know, when he probably made these statements, I'm sure there's already
Final Fantasy 9, bro.
Fucking, there you go. Like, boom.
That's what taught me to be wouldn't say it taught me to read, but that was the first thing I really enjoyed reading.
Enjoyed reading, for sure.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Those games are novels.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. That's why I like a fucking you can almost play them over and over again. Like it's like reading a good book, right?
Yeah.
And you can get through them without even bothering with the systems. I was a kid. I was too stupid to even understand what the systems were.
Oh,
right?
I was the worst, man. I was like, why are certain characters' attacks so low? Not realizing, like, you're supposed to
I
fucking
didn't
use
understand
magic.
any of it.
Fucking
I played
idiot,
Final
like,
Fantasy VIII without
drawing at all.
the whole game. I was like, why can't I beat the last boss? They have fun.
Didn't draw any fucking spells. Stupid
kid. Didn't even bother. But hey, it just goes to show, like, the story was the purpose. I didn't care about that shit.
Yeah.
I didn't care at all. You know? To me, it was just
fucking get through it and see what the fuck was happening.
To this day, I could do without complex gameplay systems. I don't give a shit about that. Obviously, like, based on everything I just said, you could probably infer that my primary preoccupation is the concept being expressed, and if you can pare back the matter as much as possible, all the better, right? Can't wait till they can just inject it into my brain directly,
Yeah,
you know?
right.
And then I don't have to fucking
scan it. Okay, I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think video games, well, anyways, to fucking resolutely fucking answer that, are definitely art, and the best kind of art, based on all the shit we just said.
Yeah, I mean, I would obviously be keen on agreeing with that.
Yeah. And
without even hearing your points, but
people are gonna ask, what's the fucking a great example of this? Of course, my first fucking thing would be probably Miyazaki games.
Yeah,
right?
Probably
Miyazaki games for
me. I'd say like Hideo Kojima stuff, like Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, and I fucking love 1.
For the Miyazaki games, for the world building and the way that the systems are perfectly proportionate to that world building and an expression of them, you know?
Yeah.
Fuck Kojima games, of course.
Kojima games are just wild and out there, but they really fucking...
Yeah, Kojima games, of course.
Super interesting, weird,
Death Stranding especially. And also all of the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, pretty much. They're all
before at least before the fucking MMOs, and, you know, even the ones after that, you know, those games, like... It's strange to me that people say these things and are unaware of they're pretty big games. You must know Final Fantasy, and you must know that it's actually, bro, it's a novel. Like, those games are novels, right? You know that, right?
Fuck, I mean, the early ones were on multiple discs.
They're longer than any Cormac McCarthy book. There's more writing in it. What makes it to you less, you know?
What games at that time were on multiple discs? There was a few for sure, but
these are like
7 was on 3, 8 was on 4, I think 9 was on 4 discs.
We moved into the fucking
that? Like, what?
This is the like realm of like low hanging fruit and fucking, but it's still valid, right? Like, this guy, you know, you're just factually like just misinformed, bro, right?
Yeah, I guess you can chalk it up to he's definitely
not true, right? Like, so I guess now I should definitely shut the fuck up. We'll be back sometime soon to talk to you guys more about something exactly like this. We love you and take care.
Oh yeah.